Boy, oh boy, what a week it's been. Greta Thunberg at the United Nations at the so-called Climate Summit, addressing the governments of the world and using that memorable phrase, "How dare you?" A phrase that should go down in history as the emblem of the international climate change movement. Can you get over those millions upon millions of people who demonstrated, and they were involved in strikes and marches on the street on Friday, September the 20th? I've lived a life long enough to have watched the anti-Vietnam War movement and the campaign for nuclear disarmament and the anti-apartheid movement and the civil rights struggle in the United States and the Me Too movement now. They were all and are tremendously impressive, but nothing approximates the monumental expression of humankind around climate change. And indeed, today, I'm taping this on Friday, September 27th, in Canada. Canada is joining that international climate change movement. It's expected that there will be 300,000 to 500,000 people on the streets of Montreal alone, and Greta Thunberg is there to address them. So you would think, anyone would think, that the governments of the world, in the face of this outpouring of human concern, would modify their obstinate adherence to policies that are driving climate. It didn't happen. What did happen was that a small number of countries, they're low-income countries, middle-income countries, and island states, came to the conclusion that they would achieve the target of zero emissions of carbon by the year 2050, but the big fossil fuel emitters refused to join them. Indeed, those who are coal dependent were worst of all. China, India, Indonesia said nothing about their dependence on coal. Countries like Japan and Australia that are wed to coal and coal projects around the world didn't even turn up, as the United States didn't turn up because it's in denial. Countries like Russia and Qatar, dependent on oil and gas and exporting those products, refused to say anything about the diminution of those exports. Countries like those in the European Union, from whom we expected a great deal, refused even to raise the paltry targets they had set at Paris. In other words, the governments remained obdurate. So we have these two parallel forces. We have the climate change movement and the obstinate governments. What do? Do we just give up? Not a chance. Because in fact, the climate change movement understands that the forces of global warming are leading to terrible impoverishment around the globe, and above all, they are a dreadful threat to human health. And that's something about which AIDS-free world knows a great deal. We know that these climatic convulsions that move from hurricanes and flooding on one end to droughts and famine on the other, we know that they compromise human health in the worst ways. It leads to deprivation around agricultural production. It leads to inadequate access to medicine. It leads to lack of funds to buy medical drugs. It means that diseases like dengue fever and cholera proliferate. And as we know well in AIDS-free world, it means that HIV and tuberculosis cannot be addressed as fully as they should be addressed because governments and countries are in turmoil. The fight will continue. There's no question, because these are young people and their futures and their survival depend on it. They will not give up. And on October the 11th, when Greta Thunberg receives the Nobel Peace Prize, as she will, we can all say with one voice, Greta, the planet is in your debt. That was last week. I'm Stephen Lewis.